We're really excited to have artists Dominique Knowles and Mari Eastman here for a walkthrough and conversation on the occasion of Knowles' exhibition, The Sun Sinks at Soccer Club. Knowles received both his MFA and his BFA from the School of Art Institute of Chicago and has had recent solo exhibitions at Goldfinch, the Green Gallery, the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas, and pop-up studios in Nassau, the Bahamas. Mari Eastman has exhibited at the Hammer Museum, Museum of Contemporary Art Los Angeles, the Orange County Museum of Art, the Berkeley Museum of Art, Cherry and Martin Gallery, Barbara Gladstone Gallery, and numerous other venues. She holds an MFA from the Art Institute of Chicago and is on faculty of SAIC's Painting and Drawing Department. First, I think we're going to have a slideshow of some of the artworks throughout the conversation, but yeah, they are going to be speaking about the work and the exhibition. And if anyone has any questions throughout, please put them in the chat and we'll give them an opportunity to speak about to answer them afterwards. So yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna let them take it away.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming and watching. I'm so glad Mari is here with me at Soccer Club, as she also had a show here in the past. So it'll be a great conversation, I hope.
Yeah, can you, by the way, can you hear us? Because we got the masks on and I'm just wondering if it's good.
Yeah, Max said that he could hear you guys just fine, but if you want to reconfirm that you guys can hear the conversation okay?
Yeah, I think Dom, if you could talk a little louder.
Okay.
Well, yeah, Dom, thank you so much for asking me. And although it's called a conversation, my fervent wish is that it's going to be Dom who's doing most of the talking, and I'm going to ask questions.
Okay.
So this is actually, today is my first time to see the show, and I think it looks so beautiful. And I had Dom as a student when he was an undergrad, so I am pretty familiar with the scope of your work. But for people who aren't, I was wondering, well, horses have always been the theme. But I was wondering if you could tell us just a little bit about your thoughts about the show and how you wanted to hang it and the work in it. And yeah, I guess we'll start there.
Okay, so there are about a handful of horse imagery, but it's not totally dominating the exhibition. Most of it is abstracted or through color and light and the landscape through the sunset. So it's basically the space of luminosity that the horses exist in that I'm presenting here at Soccer Club.
And this, so I really love this painting. I'm used to seeing this is maybe the third, I don't know. You've done several paintings almost at the scale or at a similar scale. Some of them are painted directly on the wall. And usually they have the body of a horse, like the silhouette of a horse, and it's complete. And there's a real turn to abstraction in this show, and also your show at Goldfinch. And I really, I'm really curious about it. And the other thing that really struck me in this piece is like there seems to be a really direct conversation and reference to cave paintings. And I don't have my cave paintings all memorized, but I know I've seen images of repeating horses, almost as if the painter was trying to show movement and running. It was almost like a movie. And I think the connection for me here was stronger than in some of the other work I've seen. And I was curious about that, wanting to know more.
Right. So with cave painting, especially at Chauvet Cave in France, they painted the animals and other human animal figures through transformation, but also through movement. And it happened over like thousands of years. And each artist would come and add more layers. And at the Chippewa cave, it went in a circular motion, and it's in harmony with the wall and the cave's formation over time, as well as the rhythm of the water flowing through the cave, and also the floor of the cave where the bones are. So it's a whole like environment that these artists made their works in, either ceremonially, but also there was a practical element with cave paintings that it showed which animals existed, which beings became extinct, how did they understand themselves as being enmeshed with the other spirits or other figures in the world, whether it's like the prehistoric sculptures of like half man and half like bear, or those figures that are and becoming enmeshed with the buffaloes on the cave drawings as well. So
Are Chabot Caves, is that the one that
By
Werner Herzog did a film
yeah,
of?
by
Okay,
the point draw,
so those were only discovered in the 90s?
1995 or 3 or something like that.
Crazy. And they're from like 35,000 years ago? How
Like
many?
40,000 years ago.
40. And the style of painting didn't change from 40,000 years ago to like 25,000. It was like
Yeah.
for 20,000 years, pretty much similar materials. Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah, my friend shared the Werner Herzog film with me a couple weeks ago, so I like binge watched it 3 times or so.
Oh my God, you hadn't seen it till now?
No,
Wow, I can't believe I didn't recommend that to you.
it's
Wow. So now that I have heard that, I'm actually thinking this to me looks more and more, and I was thinking earlier that the dark space for me looked like kind of a, like it shows depth. And some of these lighter areas, like up here and this pink light area, they almost look like rock coming out. And now that you've told me that, it reinforces my idea that this is actually a painting of Chabot. Like it's almost like you're painting the relief. And now it flips for me from being an abstraction to kind of a landscape, like a literal landscape.
right. Especially there's so many mirrors in Soccer Club that it really shows like the symmetry of the painting, and you wouldn't really expect that because it's so fluid and the gestures are always moving and there's no real resting spot in the painting. But I was thinking of like the western coast of the Americas and those landscapes, especially with Mustangs in the US that were brought over here. And historically, there's different ways of domesticating the Mustangs, whether you're of European descent or if you're indigenous cultural beliefs. So now the Mustangs are being like chased by helicopters by the BLM, which is like the US government, in order to clear space for cattle and livestock, because they claim that Mustangs are overgrazing, when really there are less Mustangs than there are cattle and buffalo. So I was also just thinking of Mustangs galloping through the desert, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I know on your Instagram you often call attention to instances of animals being abused, horses being abused. And I think it's really, in all of your work and your approach to art, Dom, it's always been enmeshed with life. And in terms of, to give an example, you have pieces that are poetry that are carved into rock that have to do with people in your life. Or sometimes I would come in and we would talk, you would sort of talk about Hegel and your mom's text in practically the same sentence.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're responding to them all. It was always this interesting thing to me where there's really no difference. I don't get a feeling you're like, and this is the art and apart from the Mustangs. You're like, no, these are the Mustangs. I'm concerned and I have to save them.
Right. And I feel with the cave paintings, it was one of the earlier forms of art with horses in them, where the horses weren't used as objects or pedestals for political figures.
Like they're not symbolic, they represent themselves.
Like in cave paintings, it was more like a sacred space. And in, you know, European paintings of horses or equestrian portraits, it was about like the syntax and power structures related to humans, not necessarily. Or, you know, George Stubbs also made animal welfare paintings as well, like the thoroughbreds at the racetracks that are injured and so on. But generally, horses in the European painting history are iconic and more like objectified. So for me, it's as long as the work is expression, then that allows for that fluid movement between life and art, where it becomes just an alchemy rather than a citation. So it's like it's not always it's not pre-planned, but it's just an ongoing meditation and a life practice through art.
Should we step through and so the interesting thing about this show is that some of the work is brand new from this year, and then some of it is from like 4 years ago or 3 years ago when you were in undergraduate.
Right. So the earliest painting is 2015, and I finished it in 2019.
Okay.
So that's it's over there at the end.
The dark one around the corner.
Right.
Should we take a look at it?
Sure.
Or it can be brought up on the slide. Sure, it's okay, look at it.
It's the Anoyo painting. It's black, and it reminds me of the earth if we were looking at it through a distance and out of space.
So I'm thinking also about the lighting. The lighting at Soccer Club is bar lighting. And when I came in, I was asking about that because before we had the shades up, it was darker. And Sue was saying that you requested to not have more lights. So I wanted to ask you about, because there is something about this medium dark lighting, like this painting on a black wall, and I can barely see, it's more textural how I can distinguish it. And I was curious about that, how your decision about the lighting and the low lighting.
So the low lighting really helps the black paintings from this period because it reduces the amount of reflection but on the surface of the painting, and it allows for the viewer to see all the various nuanced tones of black and temperature shifts and opacity and transparency and all of these like poetic movements in painting. The black wall was actually from the Green Gallery show last summer, because I followed Sky Hopinka's exhibition, and he uses cinema and photography and poetry. So I basically put the black painting, John Ripnoff and I, we put it in the cinema room, and it really helped keep a soft, graceful like presentation for the painting. So I just kept that here. And the lighting at Soccer Club, there's like 3 forms, but I just chose it to be very romantic with the soft ambient light because of the atmosphere of the space as it is. I wanted to feel as if I was like in a Western romantic film. Yeah.
We talked more about that because that's the second time you brought the Western up. I'm just gonna.
Well, it's, there's like wood, and I feel like I'm in a barn sometimes, like
Okay.
in the front. And it was actually your show with Rebecca Morris and Mary Rutherford, where Rebecca's painting was on that wall where you're standing.
Yeah.
And it was like so moody, and there was like dark shadows, and the painting was just glowing on the wall. So I just wanted to maintain that integrity of light in the space for the show.
That was like a black and white, almost like zebra, like, but it was with spots.
Mhm.
But yeah.
It was a grid painting.
Actually, I did think also of Mary Weatherford's paintings in that big one because you're using flash now. And is that new or do you always?
The flash was because I made a billboard outside, and the painting is called Desert Dust. And actually Grant, who works here at Drag City Records, titled that one for me.
Oh.
Because we were talking about the landscape. So that had to be in flash because it's outdoors. And for the mural that is inside the space, Must Signs at Dusk, I used half of it on the left where it's the ochre, and the oil is more of the red ochre and umber colors on the right, and the horses as well. So it was a mix.
Dawn, do you want to talk about your horse riding?
Okay.
Or wait, should we talk more? Is there anything? These paintings are also new to me. And the main thing I noticed is the abstraction of them. Although when I backed off from this one, I started to think this was also about animal forms.
So these two, this one, like Dreaming of Angels and Leaving Without Them, is from 2016, and the more ochre one.
Wait, this is from 2016?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I thought it was new.
Thanks. I guess it looks fresh to you.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one, In Hopes of Seeing a Sunset Over the Goldfield, is from 2017.
Oh, wow.
At the end of my time with advanced painting and
Oh, wow. So you started off more abstract and now you moved to representation and now you're sort of headed back to abstraction.
well,
Or
in a way, yes, because the mural and the billboard are both mostly just color fields or abstract landscapes. But most of these abstractions are before the horse paintings because I took my time and spent a lot of years understanding light and color in the painting to create that luminosity, even though I've always been talking about the horses, even when the horses weren't in the painting. So once the luminosity was there, I felt as if there was a space that was ethical enough to put the horses in.
ethical? Did you say ethical?
Yeah, so I really appreciate when the horses aren't compressed in the space of the painting or distorted. So it's that, intimacy and embodiment that I find in these more abstracted landscapes, or the sunsets. Because I started making these sunset paintings after traveling in Amsterdam and Paris, like being with friends. So it was a very bucolic, very like almost sentimental time. And so I started these, and then the horses came through that intimacy found in the paintings. So that was like a way to finally articulate the meaning of the horses.
Love.
Yeah.
I would have, I don't know if I find the work bucolic.
No, but at least that period, it was very floral time, at least.
Yeah, I remember you had installations with flowers, and again, I always interpreted them as flowers almost that you'd see at a funeral or see something. But so
Yeah, it was
yeah,
meaningful.
yeah, I'm thinking this for me, the scene here, or like they both seem kind of sad.
Yeah.
But it could be because I have a narrative about your horse that you're supporting, your horse from childhood that you basically are sort of supporting from afar.
Yeah. So, yeah, like these ones came after I was in Paris and like met Fred. So there, it was also like mournful because it can have like layers of different registers. Because you can mourn someone who's still alive, there's just like distance, like physically. So that's also like how the flowers were both very tender, but also like grieving. And I remember a comment where people couldn't really tell who the flowers were for, if it was like for the bereft or for the, the person grieving. It's almost like a gift in reverse of the flowers.
Yeah, that's another thing about your paintings of both the portrait of your own horse and also kind of how you talk about him almost as, and I know he's older, so it makes sense, but I feel like for years now you've been planning his funeral.
Yeah, like a pre-death mourning. It's like this painting is called Your Bones Breathe Warmth. And so this is one of the earlier horse paintings or horse forms in the painting.
But why? I mean, yeah, it's just, yeah, that's like a funny thing to me. It's not funny. That's not the right word. But I have been curious about that in that the sort of like the horse is alive. He might not be with you. Maybe there's the homesickness or the grief or the apartness. But in the language that when you talk about it, it's always like, sometimes we've had conversations where I've been confused because I thought the horse's death was imminent, or there's like a permanent mourning for an animal that's actually kind of doing okay.
Right.
What's that about?
I think it's the transitions. Like, so with your sons, when they stop being a certain age, that's like you can't have them back as they were at that, you kind of like grow with them.
Yeah, but
And
that's true. Yes. I mean, and
you also plan for the future at the same time. It's like a Janus where you're looking back and forward at the same time.
it seems like, do you feel that it's harder for you to be in the present?
No, it's that our mortality and death is always an underlying, like, precedent, like, energy. Like, you're always, like, so close to death, or there are so many forces that would rather certain people or beings not exist. Or like, it's like surviving or existing has this political tone.
Do you think your work has anything to do with, because I know the environment, animals or something, you're really, tuned into, is it a form of almost like mourning because of global warming or environmental holocaust? Is that,
Well,
and yeah,
well, there's that as like a collective mourning. And then interpersonally, the horse also could not be like, you can't really control that. Like, or like my dogs have passed away over the years and this year. So the horse becomes metaphoric as well as literal at the same time for all of these other deaths in the family, so to speak.
it's gotten really sad now. Maybe we should, well, I'm gonna process what you've said, but now I also think, yeah, the work really is elegiac more than I had initially thought. But can you tell me a little bit about your path as a horse rider? You rode horses competitively.
Right.
In fact, your goal was to go to the Olympics. And then there's a transition to art. And also, did you want to take us outside to see the mural or?
No, I think the image of the mural with
Okay.
the
all right.
billboard would be okay. So for horseback riding, I started when I was 4, going to the horse stables. And my grandfather, my beloved, is what everyone called him, and that's what he called everyone. He started taking me to the horse stables because I love dogs so much. And there was this baby horse named Boomer, a miniature baby horse. And Boomer's mother was named Tinkerbell. So I took Boomer around in the walk in the neighborhood for like 2 years until I was 6 years old and was old enough to ride horses. So I started actually competing then at 6 years old. When I was 10, I started competing not only in the Bahamas, but in the States or in Florida and Palm Beach as well. And that competition continued until the end of high school. And then I went to Chicago at 17 years old to study film and then painting, and now we're here.
What made you decide that to move away from being a competitive rider to an artist?
It wasn't really a decision because I still am always working towards horseback riding again. And art actually is helping me move closer to being able to ride again as well. So I wanted to be a vet growing up, but I had to take so many dogs to the freezer during my community service in high school that I realized that I was too emotionally sensitive to be a vet. And my uncle, John Cox, who runs Pop-Up Studios, he's an artist in the Bahamas and globally. And that space was a very nourishing environment. And so I intuitively just started growing and expanding in the art space as well. And horses, they're super sensitive creatures, and your nervous system is attached to their nervous system when you're horseback riding. So you have to be it's almost like you have to be a monk and an athlete at the same time when you're horseback riding. And that creates what it seems like ballet on horses.
When you say a monk, do you mean like spiritually attuned to
them? Like you really can't have any projections onto the horse. You can't have anxiety or negative energy with the horses because they're very in tune to how humans and other animals in the world are. So art was a great space to release a lot of the energies that is not very safe to give to the horse. So horses and art symbiotically create a more holistic like way of life. So that's how this whole thing. Oh, I've also been drawing horses since I was like a kid in kindergarten.
Yeah.
So I've been at least drawing horses my whole life.
I love Lisa Haller Bogason's quote
Yeah.
about horses are the gateway drug to art. I mean, that
Right.
was totally the case with me.
Yeah. And your sister rides horses
My
too.
sister rides horses. Yeah.
And Laura Owen's sister who rides horses as
Yeah.
well.
And Mary Weatherford
Yeah.
has started horse riding lessons. I mean, I don't,
Yeah, anyway.
yeah. We'll post on the list of horse riding artists in the chat later.
Can be part of the Q&A.
Are there any, I don't know, are there any
Oh,
questions?
yeah, there are questions in the Q&A or,
Well, I have actually, so you are like super busy right now.
okay, yeah.
And how do you like, I mean, talking about Zen and anxiety and, I mean, that would make me kind of anxious. It's like really exciting, but it's also hard. Can you, I don't know, talk a little, so you have a show here, you have one up at Goldfinch, you have 2 group shows coming up, or, right?
Yeah, so there's one in Munich at Sperling Gallery, a part of the various others art festival. So there's curated by or curated at in Vienna, and there's Condo London or Condo New York. So this is the Munich version, and you get to have museums a part of it as well as galleries and artisan spaces. And you know, public sites like Felix Gonzalez Torres has a public artwork and part of various others. So Emmanuel Lehr Gallery invited me to be a part of this group show in Munich with Lena Henke and Megan Francis Sullivan. And all of those artists have relationships to horses.
Okay. Wait, on purpose? Or
Yeah.
just coincidental? Should we move around? I'm worried that our viewers
We
are like,
We
want
can
more
move to the,
dynamic.
back to the main painting.
And are you sure you don't want to show the outdoors? You
No,
wanna walk out there.
the image is okay. Because, you know, perspective when you're like up, because it's like 20 feet in the air.
Okay, I will, you know, so just a side note for those of you who aren't familiar with this space, it was a private sort of club run by a Polish.
I can give the spiel.
Oh, yeah, okay,
You're right.
spiel. I know, I'm
Sorry,
just
I'm
kidding.
Sue. I work at Soccer Club Club. So Soccer Club Club was originally owned by a Polish Olympic soccer player. And fun story is that he also housed many Polish immigrants in this building. Many of them had not, you know, a lot of them were undocumented and illegal, if we're going to use that term. And he used this space as a gathering space to play soccer shows and soccer games. And it was private. It was never listed, and it was never there was never an alcohol license applied to this bar, and it remained secretive until, you know, he sold the building. But he has a lot of these like really great murals that he commissioned for the space, etc. So it has that history.
You should get a peep of the mural.
There's an image with the painting and the mural compounding together.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, tons of mirror. Yeah, 2 murals. Oh yeah, that looks awesome.
Mhm.
We do have one question in the chat, in the Q&A, which I don't know if we would want to answer it now.
Yeah, sure. Give me 1 second to pull it up. Sorry, I apologize. I'm on my
I
phone,
can
so
read it out loud.
quickly open it. Okay. Okay, so do you want me to read the question out loud?
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, if you have it, you can read it, yeah.
Okay. It says, "Hi, Dom. It is quite exciting to see that you are showing works from 2016, 2017 together with new works. Could you explain or say something of your relation to time or that specific aspect, Emmanuel?" Let me know if you want me to repeat it as well.
Who is it by?
Emmanuel Lehr. Sorry if I
Oh.
mispronounced your last name.
Oh, Emmanuel Lehr.
Emmanuel.
Hi, thanks for watching, Emmanuel. So I think the learn expanse of time in the paintings exhibitions really like helps to like slow it down and show a breadth of the work. And even the Green Gallery show was 2010 to 2019 in terms of the expansive work, because the horse video Sandina was 2010, and then the paintings and the show started in 2015 up until 2019. So time, right? So it's more of like a Kairos time that's experiential, not necessarily a Chronos time that's chronological or about telos and project and new. It's almost like a primordial, eternal sense of time that I'm trying to articulate. Right. It's beyond time, I hope. Yeah. But also I'm like a slow painter and a fast painter. Like this took a week for me to make. But there's so much emotional processing that is between each painting's manifestation, like in the physical realm of form, that the experiences to then be able to make these paintings takes time to happen and develop, at least to articulate the vision.
Did you make this on site?
I made this in my studio, but yeah, thanks for your question, Randall. I hope that answers it.
That is, I think, typical of your practice, actually, where I think there's a lot of kind of reading, conversing, actually a lot of hustling to take care of your horse. And then the painting will happen in this sort of compressed time. And I'm actually, there is something about that I do love, that you're not always like in sort of productivity mode. And a lot of your time is spent thinking.
Right. And
Or not just thinking, actually
or
living.
like feeling, living,
Yeah.
dying, being, mourning, loving. Yeah, so with this one and the billboard outside, the Julius Caesar wall painting, as well as the Green Gallery wall painting, were all made like within a week or two. And it's mostly this like very adrenaline based, I guess, like process when I'm like making this monument of a painting for a particular space or the people and team around that space. And it changes as well because the relationship to the people in that space influences what the monument painting would be like. So in Julius Caesar, the work and the exhibition was also based on like animals. So they're like farm animal materials and feed. And so that painting had molasses in it, which is the medicine of my horse. And the Green Gallery painting was made in front of that wall of windows at the Green Gallery. So then everyone at the space or around the space, would talk while I'm making it. So all these relationships influence and get absorbed into the painting. With the adrenaline and being in the moment, I also think it brings up like courage sometimes. But like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman, she actually says like courage isn't like what you feel in the moment. You just feel like fear. And courage is just what you understand or perceive that moment as at the end after you already did what you felt you needed to be done at that time?
So when you start on a painting of this size and you're working on it, are you saying that you do feel some fear, or do you have an idea of what it will look like, or a vague idea, or a sketch, or how do you go into these paintings?
With this scale, I just start and then I just like follow it as I'm painting it, and then I just like sort of like help it at the end become more like balanced, I suppose.
But when you start, are you thinking about color? Because they also
Yeah.
seem really all about palette. Like,
Right. So the only thing that's like premeditated is the color and the figures. Like like I know I want to have horses or male nudes in it or other, like atmospheric qualities, and there are various tones of ochre. But how that's gonna like come to be is not known yet. So there's like this beautiful moment in painting with the unknown and allowing chance into it. Yeah.
that reminds me of a Kate Bush song. She has a
Oh.
song about an artist, and she says it was like the most beautiful mistake.
Yeah. And then after the painting's done and hung up, it takes me a while to like sink into it. It's like a come down, and then it takes a while to see it as like at once or or as a whole, because it's like a very large scale. So it becomes a while before it coalesces into an image.
And how long is that time? And when do you know, okay, this is right? And do you go back into the painting, or do you kind of do it in a rush and it's done?
For the mural ones, I kind of do it and then it's done because it's kind of like a burst of energy. And then I just like it took me a year to finally sink into the green gallery wall painting either. Not that I didn't love the painting, but yeah, to feel in love with the painting took like a year.
I think this step of kind of eliminating the body of the horse and realizing it's just enough to show the heads or part, and then to get so painterly with the paint is really exciting.
Thanks. It was also just like that was all I can muster was the
Yeah.
horses' heads.
Because it's so huge.
Well, or not large enough. Because there's so much energy that I just saw like just red in
Yeah.
the middle of the painting, and there's different shadows and lights within that red, and I was like, oh my god, I can see horses' lines in it. Because when you're like obsessed with horses, you see them everywhere you go, and you like imagine them, and so that enigma, I just sort of described it in paint so that it's concrete for everyone to see or to be visible. But I did it also because when horses are galloping, they're so fast that you only see certain concrete moments. And so the horse heads is all I needed to articulate that they were galloping.
Yeah, and it also the repetition gives
Yeah.
the illusion of movement.
Or the precision of the horses' heads in the painting is the precision of the horses' heads in real life when they're galloping. So you only need that moment of recognition to imagine for yourself the whole event.
Do you think, and okay, this is a weird question. I mean, this is actually something I grapple with, but do you, well, I guess my question is answered, but I was thinking, is there a way that the paintings actually help horses? But I realized, yes, there is, because you have your horse that you're supporting.
Right.
You're like kind of paying his room and board through working, painting. But I was thinking very specifically of the Mustangs in the West and your Instagram And if there's concrete actions, I guess I was thinking about activism, which I was going to say a complicated relationship to, but I don't really think it's even that complicated. I think like most of us, activism is something very difficult to get involved in. But there is something when you talk, and certainly I think when you're thinking, in which you are thinking about how can we change the world.
Yeah. So there's this sanctuary in the West, in Malibu and in Oregon, called Skydog.
Oh, yes.
And I shared that, and then you started following and supporting them.
Yeah.
And
I followed them. I didn't really support them.
right, but more,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
saw more artists starting to follow them as well.
Yeah.
And they get like actors to like adopt Mustangs.
Yeah.
And I re-adopted my horse, and most of my dogs are adopted. So I think with animals, a lot of it is adoption to help them.
That's a good shout out.
Yeah.
No, they are awesome. And
Yeah.
actually,
It's like super beautiful.
Yeah.
Their ranch.
and the stories are heart wrenching.
Right. So basically, they make these connections at Skydog Ranch. A lot of the practices that governments use on animals, at like the corrals for the Mustangs, is mirrored by the practices that governments use on humans at
Yes.
the borders. So like there's sterilization of the mares, and all these other things that are not proven to be ethical or humane yet. So I feel as if relationships to animals and the earth underlines a lot of our other relationships with each other in the world.
I totally agree. And I think there is something about how we treat animals, and then how when we begin to call or name other groups of people animals, then that's like it sort of like gives us license to also ill-treat them. And I think the basic evil is the mistreatment of other life on Earth, and I think the prioritizing of order.
Right. Because the cave artists, there's new studies that show that most of them were women, not men, who made the cave paintings.
Well, they're smaller hands,
Right.
and I guess women's fourth finger is a little bit shorter.
Right.
So they were saying either they're like juvenile men
Or women.
yeah. But the fact that the fourth finger is a little shorter in women, supports it.
So with cave paintings, a lot of it is about representation projected onto the cave paintings because of how people construct mythology and history and create all of these narratives around the cave paintings in order to have a way to understand the cave paintings, even though they know it might just be all fiction. So the function of representation is inherent to at least the researchers and scientists relative to cave paintings. Because the etymology of human and humanity didn't exist when cave paintings and cave artists existed or were created. So the etymology of human or humanity is a construct, and it centered, like people of power as more human, and that allowed for them to, construct who was not human, and dehumanize people and call, the whole debate between barbaric and being humane. So since we weren't always human, I'm really looking forward to a point where we're not human and we're in this new sort of understanding of self. Because I think as long as there's humanity, it's going to be inhumanity and dehumanization. But I understand that the, definition of humanity, which is to be humane, is necessary in order to articulate crimes against humanity. So it's more like law not necessarily like morality sometimes, you know.
Maybe we should aspire, but I like this idea of trying to evolve to being beyond human.
Right, without
just
it being
being-
like non-human, because that still makes a negation, or post-human, because that's sort of like chronological.
But
But
just to
something
think about
else, yeah.
being. That might be a good drop the mic moment.
Okay. What?
Doesn't show on my phone.
Is there any other questions?
No, but Emmanuel says thank you.
Oh, thank you, Emmanuel.
12:55.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions in the chat right now, but yeah, thank you guys so much for participating and providing such amazing insight into this exhibition and the beautiful work. And thank you, Mari and Soccer Club for helping make this happen. And thanks everyone for joining too.
Bye, Max.
Bye.
Say
Thank you.
hi to Marie for me.
I will.
Thanks,
and-
Sarah.
Our next event is at 4 p.m. It's a performance with artist Elliott Bergman, who has a show up at Shane Campbell Gallery. So I encourage anyone to join if they can. And the full program is also in the chat as well. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.